Are you trying to use LinkedIn for a lead generation tool for sales in your business? Today I'm going to interview Ryan Caswell, the CEO of b2bleads.com. We're going to talk about his secrets and what he does to generate thousands of leads for his clients on a regular basis across a broad spectrum of clients. What I learned from this webinar, it's actually not rocket science. There's a few key things that Ryan does that I haven't seen before on LinkedIn, and you may want to pay attention to it. And one of the biggest takeaways, if you don't watch the whole webinar, is about the Boolean search. I'll put the timestamp in the description below if you wanted to skip to that part. But what I've done is I created a downloadable template to get you started with a framework and some other content on the Boolean search. That really is a game changer. Since that webinar, I've been using it as well, and it's completely opened up my target market, and it could do for you as well. So 100% grab that downloadable doc below. Also, if you're looking to improve your lead generation strategy, thanks for joining us today, Ryan.
No worries, Gavin. Good to be here. Excited to, similar to Roman, ask some tricky questions potentially.
So I guess as we're going on today, I'll reiterate this throughout the webinar. If you have any questions about specific topics, we're going to go high level in the beginning and then more tactical towards the end. So if you have any specific questions or for Ryan or about LinkedIn, please put them in the chat. I'll monitor the chat and we'll go from there. So opposed to if we get to the end and you forget what we spoke about, please don't hold back. There's also, I've got a poll that I'm about to go live. It'd be interesting to know from everyone. I just released a poll there. Do you find lead gen effective at the moment for generating leads? It'd be good to know what those stats are as a reference point today as well, if possible. Great. All right. So we'll give it one more second and then we'll get going. And I feel partial. Thanks for that. Excellent. Thanks, CJ. Cool. All right. So let's get into it. So today is the topic is the secret to generating thousands of leads. So I've asked Ryan to join us today. Ryan has a company is the founder of B2B Leads. He has many clients, and over the course of the life of the business has generated thousands of leads. So surely there's a system that Ryan's used, some techniques that I've certainly learned from him as well, and he's been more than gracious in sharing them today. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Ryan.
No worries, Gavin. Excited to be here.
Great. So Ryan, I've got your about me. I'm going to do a little bit different today. So you're the B2B Leads founder. You started your professional career in mining and work as an engineer. This is completely different to where you are now, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of engineering that I still bring to the table, like in process and optimization. But yeah, very different to mining for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think lead generation at the end of the day is process optimization, right? You're not going to get it right in the first instance, but as long as you continually strive to improve, sooner or later you will hit the vein of leads coming into the business.
Yeah, 100%. There's definitely an element of not art but creativity, but using data and engineering to help guide you is paramount.
Yeah, you're right. The contradiction between art and science, right?
Yeah.
So you had a failed eco farm and a B&B in the remote mountains of Brazil, and then you started a rock climbing company, and you met failure after failure without learning the valuable lesson along the way. What was that lesson, mate?
Many businesses attempts along the way. The valuable lesson I learned along the way was you need to have a way to reliably acquire clients. So essentially, if you follow a process costs money. You can acquire clients for a cost, then that is going to provide a return. Essentially, it sounds simple, but a lot of people think that build it and they'll come. Not always the case.
You'd be surprised. I see so many founders who are technically minded, and they finding leads and sales is an afterthought, and then they get so far down the track and they put an enormous amount of pressure on themselves, and it's really a no-win situation. So yeah, I completely agree with that. So you're working full-time as a web developer. You spent every spare moment you had on learning and testing digital marketing strategies in order to crack the code. So what is that code, mate?
Well, we'll dive into it in a bit here, but I think for a lot of small businesses, LinkedIn provides a lot of power to generate leads quickly and get you proof of concept. So we'll definitely be diving into that in more detail.
Great. So you found that LinkedIn was a low cost, free or low risk, quick way to generate results and simple to scale up. And not long after that, B2B Leads was born. And it's a company purely focused on running B2B lead generation for multiple different industries, right?
And yeah, 100%. So our specialty is LinkedIn outbound. We do a little bit of LinkedIn paid and some other stuff as well, but primarily that's our bread and butter. That's what we're specializing in.
Okay, awesome. And for everyone who's just joined us today, welcome. Please, as we're going along, if you have any questions when we get into more tactical stuff, please put them in the chat and we'll endeavor to answer them as we go. To answer those, to give you value, really. So let me introduce myself. So I've been in sales, many different sales roles for 20 years, from blue-collar recruitment all the way through to B2B SaaS. And in that time, in 2015, I started working for an Australian technology company, competing against the American Fortune 500 companies. And one thing that I learned in selling high value, total contract value of over $2 million, is the old ways of selling aren't enough without a strategy. If you follow all the go-to-market strategies, anyone who's on this call today, if they've done everything to do with go-to-market strategies and they've gone to the market and said, I've done everything, now you should buy, and they don't, I experienced that. And it's really difficult. And what I learned ultimately was B2B, selling B2B and B2B technology online was going to need a different approach. And that starts with lead generation. And everything to unlock your company or unlock companies is thinking outside of the box is really the way to approach sales. And I've seen what Ryan does, and that's one of the reasons I've asked him here today. So having the motivation to sell isn't enough. I had to figure out how to make target markets buy. But what I discovered, people all over the world, in our personal lives and professional lives, we all buy the same way. And it's getting someone to engage in lead generation is exactly the same. We need them to engage or pique their interest in a very similar way. So once I discovered this, I was able to reduce the length of sale by upwards of 75% for large deals. And today I work with founders and other startups to create a more positive sales experience and for them and their clients, and actually help them grow revenue in time. So we're going to get into it. It's going to be high level. It's going to be more of a discussion base. So again, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. So Ryan, let's start with a high level question. What are some of the mistakes people make when using LinkedIn for lead generation?
Yeah. So, I mean, probably the two biggest mistakes I see people making on LinkedIn is, and I think anyone who's suffered the first one knows it's one they suffer from. It's that consistency. It's being on there every day, following people up. And it's hard to do. Like, I get it when you have your work and clients that you need to deal with. How do you keep that business development active and working in the background? So the big one is around consistency. The other one that I tend to see a lot of people making is what I call billboards in the desert. They tend to think it's about, initially it's posting content, which is, like, don't get me wrong, it's a really powerful strategy. But unless you're actually serving it to a sizable audience, it's like putting a billboard in the desert. The billboard is an effective idea, but without the leverage of a sizable and relevant audience, it doesn't really work. So people really need to start on more like you see the strategies for restaurants handing out samples on the street. You really need to take that approach where you're reaching out to people, having like meaningful one-to-one conversations to start building that audience. Then once you start to serve it, it's going to make a bigger difference. So the two biggest mistakes I see very high level are consistency and focusing on the wrong things first, low leverage activities, if you will.
So that being consistent is a bit of a challenge in itself, right? Because LinkedIn is not set up for consistency. It's set up as a database, and you have to leverage, this wasn't a topic that we're going to cover today, but technology to be able to be consistent.
Yeah, 100%. The LinkedIn inbox, for anyone who's used it before, is kind of a nightmare to manage at scale, because it tends to just show you every single message ever sent and replied to, and it's very difficult to manage. And a lot of times, especially with outbound, when you're reaching out to people, you are at the bottom of their priority list, and you need to find and have ways and systems that tell you, hey, you need to follow up this person, or this person was a hot lead and you need to get back to them because they haven't got back to you. And that's one of the biggest challenges people have with outbound, and just staying consistent, getting that volume out, because ultimately there's a small percentage of any market that's in the market, problem aware and ready to buy, and you need to talk to a lot of people to find them. And for everyone else, you need to be nurturing with content and you as well.
Yeah. And I think there's a other side of what you said there. If you're putting a billboard in a desert, if you're doing low-level searches that anyone can do, which we're going to talk about this later, they're just getting saturated, right? So if you've got to use what you showed me how to do some special filtering in the system. But if you're just doing 1 or 2 level searches that anyone can do within 5 minutes, those people are getting swamped, I would imagine. So your message is also going to get drowned out because you're not really niching down or finding those untouched groups of potential buyers that aren't necessarily easy to find on the system. Would that be right?
Not necessarily. So just because they're easy to find doesn't mean it's necessarily the wrong list or the wrong people to reach out to. What really matters is that combination of, and we'll probably touch on this in a minute, like what is it that makes outbound work, and getting that combination of all those 4 things. So you can reach out to a very generic list, but if you have the right offer or the right messaging, then it can work. It can work wonders. Lists can be really simple, and they can also be really complicated. It just depends on, I guess, the campaign and what you're trying to achieve.
Okay. Yeah. Good one. All right. So the next question is, so how does LinkedIn fit into an overarching strategy, a lead generation strategy? So my take on that is LinkedIn should form, if your buyers are on LinkedIn, they should absolutely form an integral part of your lead generation strategy. But as you mentioned before, Ryan, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is there is only a really small percentage who are actively looking today, like a 3% of the market at any one time is actively looking potentially. So that lines up with the technology adoption lifecycle with those innovators, right? There's always a set of people who are looking for a problem. Now, where some companies or people do fall over is how they reach out and say, hey, this is what I have. Are you interested? And I go, no, I'm not. Okay, well, then there's nowhere to go. So I think having LinkedIn as part of an overarching short, medium, and long-term strategy to address your total addressable market, and we'll talk about, building credibility, whatever that is later on, but it should form part of your strategy, not a sole lead generation task. Because if you do that, you'll have a low success rate, to be honest. But the majority of your sales and leads will come at a later stage in 30, 60, 90 days. But they need to find a way to remember who you are and find you. Would you agree?
Yeah. I find it's helpful to sort of define the different types of lead generation just holistically. Yep. And then where LinkedIn fits into it. And it can fit into more than one place. So if we'll just break things down very simplify. I can't say it. Keep things very simple. Yep. There's 3 ways you can generate leads, essentially, high level. You got what's called outbound lead generation, or this is on reverse for me. So you got outbound lead generation. You're reaching out to people who don't know you, trying to generate leads. You got inbound lead generation. People are coming to you. So things like SEO, content marketing, they're seeing your stuff, they're reaching out to you. And then you've got things like referral and word of mouth, the cream of the crop. People have recommended you, the trust is high, they're coming to you. So a company, ultimately, if you can only have referrals and word of mouth, and that was filling you in terms of capacity, that's fantastic. They're basically free. The people who are referring you are doing all the hard work. The trust is there. The problem is that you don't always have that luxury to just dial up referrals and word of mouth and down as you need them. And what often feeds them is having more clients and more work. So the next option is inbound lead generation, very high trust, and because they're coming to you once again. But once again, you need that audience to serve that content to, and people need to be able to find you. Where outbound is really powerful and where LinkedIn using LinkedIn for outbound is really powerful is it lets you find your audience, identify your audience, reach out, start that conversation, find that small percentage that's problem aware and ready to talk. But then you're going to start feeding it into those other forms of lead generation. So yeah, that's where I see it fitting into your strategy. It works on its own, but it also starts to fuel more effective, lower cost forms of lead generation as well.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, because I think if you can use it for short, medium, and long term, it's going to pay dividends, right? Because you're getting more than one bite at the cherry, so to speak.
Yeah, we get judged very much on that short term, and rightly so. That's what we're here for. But it's the long term of it that really provides the most value, especially if you can keep nurturing that part of the audience that isn't ready to buy today, essentially.
Yeah, and a large part of it, I think, is building trust and credibility as you go, right? So people may need to see a few different things and go, oh, that's a consistent value, like consistent value they're offering, or they're being consistent in what they're talking about. And that can be done in, like we promoted this on LinkedIn in the events, but it could be in posts, which we're going to talk about later as well, and outreach. It's all part of it, all starts overlaying each other.
Yeah, and people buy and take action in a very emotional way. And sometimes I tell people, because I used to have people reach out to me saying, oh, I watch your content. I'm reaching out. I'm like, oh, what did you like about it? And they're like, honestly, I didn't really read it.
Yeah.
But the fact that it exists helped to build that trust. And it's often the case. And that's why consistency is so important. It's the idea. It's that idea, that feeling that, this guy knows what they're talking about, even if they're not listening, basically. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, great point. I've also just put a poll there out to see if everyone who's got an overarching lead generation strategy for their total addressable market as well. Now, okay, so the next one is building trust important on LinkedIn?
Yeah, 100%. And for lead generation, I mean, for anything in sales, lead generation, even servicing your clients, trust is everything. People won't buy if they don't trust, and people won't jump on a phone call if they don't feel you're credible or trust you as well. So as I imagine, you have a strategy for building more trust once you get people onto calls as part of that sales process. That you need to develop some amount of trust before they would even talk to you. Like, you basically have about 3 seconds to establish some level of trust when you reach out to someone. And I say that there's 4 key ways that you can generate trust very quickly. Through credibility, case studies, big clients that you've worked with, but by association, by niching in or focusing on a specific area of expertise, posting content, branding, or having a really strong offer. So if you can do at least one of those really well, you can help build trust and get people to talk. And
I think trust is a funny thing in my experience as well. It's not binary, right? It's not necessarily that they trust you, they're going to buy from you.
No.
Trust comes in a lot of different areas. Do I trust the problem that I may trust them as a business, but do I trust the problem in my business that needs solving? Can I trust I'm going to get the proper ROI back from this purchase? Can I trust they're going to deliver value more than the competition, right? I've just done a slide here yesterday, and it's about, it's called sales momentum, right? If you're a new business and a startup, maybe a founder, the momentum that you have in the sales process is really slow. And part of that is if you think about it on an X and Y axis, is you have to put in so much effort in the sales process to deliver trust, to build trust. Are you going to solve it the way you did? Am I going to get a full understanding of the problems that exist in my business so I trust that it's the right decision? And as you move forward towards a Fortune 500 company or a Go1 or a HubSpot, they still have to build trust, but that's largely done from the market through case studies and referrals and, just being around and a strong brand. So, trust is not binary, and it requires an extraordinary amount of effort to continually do that. And, just a personal story for myself, I did a post here a couple of weeks ago about building trust, the 16 critical elements of a sales process. And I sat there and I was like, have I got trust? Have I built enough trust in what I'm doing? And I was like, I'm actually new to the market. I don't think that I have yet, especially with new people. So part of that was writing a white paper on the topic of sales market fit, which is about building credibility. And then the next part was about to put my money where my mouth is and show value first, is I allowed some people into my coaching program on a 21-day trial. So they would have 8 coaching sessions and we would work closely together. And I had to quickly close that and put a wait list in, because that demonstrated enough trust in the process that, so many people joined up to it. So, and I just unlocked that one thing of trust. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I understand. So
perfect. Yeah, that's so good to hear. And that's where you're like, if you come back to those 4 elements or 4 ways you can build trust, you learn really heavy on the credibility side by leveraging that white paper, and then having a strong offer, an offer that's hard to say no to, value first. There's no money down. It's such a good example. And
when you think about it in our working lives offline, right? People work if they want to get promoted into a position, they work in a role first before they get the role, or they used to anyway, instead of asking for the money first and doing the role. So I think that's a way to build trust. And if we can mirror that, it's really important. So if anyone here be critical of yourself and say, am I doing a good job of building all the elements of trust that I need to at the stage my company's at? And sometimes you'll be surprised that sometimes the answer is no, but then you can...
Even as simple as, would I buy from me? So a lot of times the answer is not yes.
And that's what I ask myself. So once you get to that point, you can begin to solve it. It's a really powerful question. Roman asked here, is there a rule of thumb for how many times you should follow up on non-responsive targets before they become leads?
It depends on the level of engagement. So on LinkedIn, if I'd say 3 is kind of a good rule of thumb, with maybe some softer follow-ups in between messages. So 3 actual genuine messages, and in between that, maybe softer things, like if you like their post or you endorse some of their skills, it floats your name to the top of their inbox. But if very little interest has been shown, then probably not worth your time to just keep following up. If genuine interest has been shown and they've just ghosted you, which is frustrating but happens, once again, you're not the only priority in their life, then make the effort to follow up and try and get an answer. I hope that helps.
It's an interesting point you bring up there is, you hear all this rhetoric out in the media, online, about follow up 7 or 8 times or call twice a day or hound them until they get an answer. There is a cost to that. There is a cost to your brand. And although you might get them on the call, you will piss them off, and then you're never going to do business with them. So I think there's a part where you've got to be graceful or respect yourself and the pride and just and then go, okay, it's not right here. So Ryan and Gavin, thinking about trust, I'm considering a significant pivot for my startup. We have had a reasonable brand awareness in my network, and I am now wondering what the best way to explain pivot in my network and potential customers. Any advice? The answer is, David, we just need to understand a little bit more about what the pivot is and what caused the pivot. Like what were you struggling? I would look at it from a 1,000-foot view, and it's probably not the time to do it. So I'm happy to have a chat about it. Just have a look at a 1,000-foot view about what were you struggling to communicate. Maybe struggling might not be the right word, but what was not resonating with the market. And then, because there's a framework of how to communicate value with SaaS. And then we can make a plan from there. Because if you make the same fundamental mistake again when you pivot, you're going to get the same result. You're likely to get the same result. So I'm happy to have we have a call with you after this and just find out a little bit more. And if you want to type it in here, we'll have a look at it. But happy to, give you half an hour to just to nut that out a little bit if you want.
There's a couple of other little more technical questions. I'll answer them quickly, but we can certainly go over anything in a bit more detail at the end, like really specific questions.
Yep.
But there's a couple LinkedIn related. If someone has their email address on their LinkedIn, is that fair game? It's an interesting one. I tend to, if you do want to use their email, sort of address the elephant in the room, I think. If you find it, a lot of times it's their personal email, so it's not necessarily the best one to reach out to, but you can still reach out to it. I try to reach out first on LinkedIn, and then if not, address the elephant in the room. Hey, I tried to reach out on LinkedIn. I thought I'd try you via email. Hope you don't mind. And then lead into your message.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other questions. Do you want to get into questions now, Gavin, or sort of leave it to?
Yeah. So Roy, we'll answer your question a little later. We got a slide on that. The answer is like Julie, just to give some strategy advice on that. I think there's a part where we have to push to a certain degree, right? But sometimes you get close to that line of when you may push a little hard, like if you're messaging them and email them. I think you've got to be comfortable, or for myself, I'm comfortable that sometimes I might crack a few eggs, right? If I'm going to make an omelet, I'm going to crack a few eggs. As long as I don't consistently do it, and if it's a negative feedback, then I wind it right back and then I don't do it. So I try to get close to the line without being annoying, but I really take the feedback. If it's just one person, they're angry, or if I feel like they're unreasonable, I go, okay, well, I'll just monitor that. But if I get feedback a couple of times, I go, hang on a sec, that's not a good strategy. So that's all I would say is, try different things. If you get pushback, then don't continue it, right? Listen to what the market tells you, but don't be afraid to try things. And again, fail fast, right?
I've taken note of some of the other questions as well.
Like
I said, I can get to some of these towards the end, and more specific on what we're talking about. Maybe we can jump in and quickly answer. Otherwise, I'm worried we're not going to get through everything.
Yeah, fair enough. So talk to me about, what do you think about lead generation is recognizing patterns? So I've got an opinion on that, but do you want to go first?
Yeah. So, I mean, being an engineer by background and loving numbers, I think for me, lead generation is really understanding the patterns or the numbers in the outreach. So being able to break down the entire process into step-by-steps, and commonly it's referred to as your funnel, but like when you're reaching out to an audience, being able to define that audience and saying, all right, well, with this message sequence and this audience, how many people are connecting, and how many of those people are replying, how many of those replies are positive, and how many of those are jumping onto calls, and being able to distinguish between those, I guess, recognizing patterns, like when something's looking good versus not, is for me pivotal in lead generation. Is that what you were thinking, or not quite?
Yeah, I am. I always think from the strategy and the fundamental from 1,000-foot view first. And if we can find the principle that works in a market, then go down into if it works down, and then it should go down to the grassroots level, which is what you're talking about. So I look at lead generation is one, testing different markets and have an hypothesis of what the results that you would get. And if you've got positive results, go, oh, hang on a sec, that's a new market. So one of the things that I've discovered lately is I have two markets. I have founder-led sales who are just in their journey. They may be technically minded. Then I also have another target market that is actually starting to show itself now, where the founder is plus 5 years, maybe 5 to 10, can't get out of a certain price point because of something's going on in their business. They've tried everything. They're properly exhausted. So he could be on this call today. I'm not going to call them out, but they're properly exhausted and they've tried everything. So but I was like, oh, that's an interesting target market there. But looking at that and going, okay, well, why does that exist? Recognizing the patterns and understanding why that exists is the next level to that. And then you've got to make sure you can search for it on LinkedIn. Otherwise, it's a hunch. You can't search on a hunch.
Yeah, 100%.
So you introduced me to this topic, negative filters. I've never heard about this. So tell everyone about what negative filters are on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so I might take a little bit of a step backwards, because I think everyone could be at different levels with LinkedIn and using it for outbound. But so what this relates to, negative filters, is LinkedIn's search function. So it really lives in the how do you find your target market on LinkedIn. Now, there's two ways you can find your target market. There's more, but for the case of this and lead generation, I'll say there's sort of two key ways. If you don't have a premium subscription on LinkedIn, you can just, up in the search bar of your LinkedIn profile, you can just type in people's names or titles. You can do a bit of a basic search there. For a free service, it's not bad. But if you really want to get like the right people, engaged users on LinkedIn, you want to set up what's called Sales Navigator. And that's one of the premium subscriptions on LinkedIn. And me personally, this is really what, makes LinkedIn powerful. This is this is essentially the product, LinkedIn. People who pay for Sales Navigator and the recruitment platforms as well, they're what are paying for the platform, and pretty much everyone else is essentially the product. It's the case with social media. If you're not paying for it, you are the product. But it's really powerful, and using negative filters is a really powerful way to help identify your market. So what that means is, maybe I'll just share my screen. I'll open up Sales Navigator. Otherwise, it'll be a bit too, what's the word? Too hard to follow.
Yep.
Share screen, window. Here we go. So just to get a feel for where everyone's at, has anyone in the audience, on the webinar today, has anyone here used Sales Navigator before? Let's see, just try and get a feel for, yep. All right, Thanks, CJ. Yes, not really, no, tried it. Yep, so everyone's had a little bit, been using it, awesome. So everyone's got a bit of familiarity with the platform, not everyone. So I'll take things slow. But essentially, when you go into Sales Navigator, you can search for your target market. And there's a whole bunch of filters here that let you find them. So pretty basic stuff. Generally, when you're going after people, you want to look for their titles. So you can use filters like seniority level, but I find the best indicator of people's seniority is actually what they call themselves, because that's actually what they've decided is their seniority level, versus seniority level is kind of what LinkedIn decides is that level. So when you put in someone's job title, let's say we're going after director, that's a really great term for the business owner for small businesses. The problem with this, if you go after director solely, is that it's going to bring in every type of director that it can, because it's using what's called a Boolean search.
Like,
and what that means is,
things like that.
What was that, sorry?
Like a movie director, or all those type of roles.
Exactly. Movie director. You might just be looking for like the head decision makers in a company who do call themselves just director, but it's also going to be bringing in HR directors, directors of marketing, directors of sales. It's going to bring in everything else with it as well. So having the ability to use negative filters to exclude things that are irrelevant is a really powerful way to refine your list and make sure that you're only going after the people that are relevant for you. So for example, we might say sales and exclude sales, and now all of a sudden we're going to get rid of anyone that's a director but is specializing in sales. So that's a really simple example of using negative filters. Another really powerful thing you can do, like there's tons of different terms that we tend to exclude, things like retired, retiree, graduates always find their way in, students, professors, recruiters, they're everywhere. So that's just a bit of an intro. So that was a really long answer, but that was a bit of a intro into how you can use negative filters to refine your target market and make them more powerful.
Okay, thanks, mate. We got some more. You just started showing Boolean search there, so we'll come back to that. There you go. Wow, what a great segue into.
Yeah, all right. I might take the screen share over. I get a little bit concerned sometimes that this is a little technical, but I think given the level of experience on the call, this is definitely worth sharing. So I'll share my screen again. Share screen, there it is. A bit new to this one. So, all right, you can see my screen here.
Yep.
So Boolean search is basically, it's searching for the text. It's not an actual defined category. So like if I put in a series of letters that it's, never heard of before, it's unlikely it's going to provide much. Oh, that's weird. I don't know why that's interesting. 18 million. It can be a bit glitchy at times. But anyway, the idea of a Boolean search is it gives you a lot more power on defining the roles that you want to reach out to. So a good example of this is, a lot of times people try to come up with every single title of the roles that they want to go after. The problem is that there's almost an infinite number of different roles, especially because there's all these new different titles that people like to call themselves. What you need is to search for keywords that indicate that it is the right term. So what I mean, I put down some of the questions that we'll go over at the end as well.
Can you make your screen a bit bigger, mate?
Yeah.
Just the writing there, yeah.
So rather than saying, I want to go after sales directors, that's only going to give you sales directors. What you're better off doing is writing some rules. So you say, I want to go after people who have sales and director in their title. And so now all of a sudden you're going to get sales director, director of sales, director of marketing and sales, director of, you get all the different combinations with just a simple rule. So anyone who's interested in learning or making more powerful filters, this is a really great just little structure here you can use. And I often use this to go after all the decision makers around a specific keyword. So this is a nice little rule you can pop in the title search. So things like director, head of, chief, executive, GM, and you can sort of adjust this based on the level or the level that you want to go after. Say you want to go as low as manager roles, and then you just pop in the keyword here. So you might be going after the sales specific decision makers. So I'll pop this in the chat. I know this has been often asked of me to provide. So I'll pop that in the chat in case that's helpful for you guys to use when building out your searches.
Yep. I've also put some further info on Boolean search as from LinkedIn as well. So as a reference material there. So hope that helps a bit. Are people using Boolean search inside LinkedIn? I didn't know about it until I met Ryan. So it'd be interesting to know from everyone who's in here. So I guess, and then keywords. So going on to keywords as well. So I guess, is that, talk about keyword searching there, Ryan?
Yeah, so that sort of lives in the like what I was talking about before. If you want to go after sales decision makers, sales is that keyword and you want to base that around it. But there are you can actually use, I should just keep my share screen on. You can also just use keywords up here. So like for recruitment purposes, sometimes you might just want to include specific skill sets that people would have in, let's say Java. So you might be going after developers that have Java as their experience. You can use keywords up the top here. And your Boolean rules, if you use things like or, it means that it's going to look for someone who has Java or I'll just use HTML as an example here. Skills with Java or HTML listed somewhere on their profile. So then you can say developer. So that's a really powerful way to get more granular as well. And you can also, if you're making assumptions on, let's say you want to go after people for a SaaS product that is, around carbon tracking or improving your environmental imprint or impact, you might want to target people based on groups that they're in and like search for things like green, earth, global, and find groups that indicate these people actually, are concerned about the environment. So you increase your chances that you're going to have people that resonate with your message as well. So there's a lot of cool strategies you can use there. And if we don't touch on it with any of the questions, one of the most powerful things you can use is this little filter here. It says it's called Posted on LinkedIn. And what that does is two things I'd love you all to come away with today. The simplest things you can do to almost double the engagement from your campaigns. If you go after people who have posted on LinkedIn, what that tells you is that these people use LinkedIn. And if you don't do that, then you're going to pull in all the people who are the right people, but we just aren't sure if they're using the platform. And by nature, it's going to lower your results. And if you have a big enough audience, focus on second degree users too. So by nature, the fact that they're a second degree connection means that they're likely to have a big network. And if they have a big network, it means that they're more likely to connect as well. So more likely to engage. So two things I'd love you to take away from today. These two are one of the simplest ways you can boost your engagement by focusing on them specifically.
And so with that, once you make sure we don't have another question for it. So with that as well, excuse me, something's happened here. So with that, Ryan, so you build out your different search criteria for different target markets, and then you save that, and then it updates that. You continually, you just build out the filter criteria. You're building a search out and saving those searches on LinkedIn. How do you do that?
So you basically, there's just a little save button up in the top left corner. You save that list. Ideally, you want lists. You don't want to be creating tons of different lists. You want a list you want to identify what's the most likely audience to engage. And then you want to try and, especially if you're doing this yourself, you're not a lead gen agency like us. You don't have the time to tweak and adjust. you just want to try and keep it simple. Once you've identified them, keep the list nice and big, and then find the active users once you've saved it. There's a quick question here that's related to InMail. Someone's asked, how do you get past the limited InMail messages per month? So I think it's probably around 30 or 60. It does change. InMails I find are fairly not super effective. I find you're better off actually connecting with people, and then you can message them as much as you need. But you can actually get around the limit on InMail if you target open profiles specifically. So people that are have the little premium LinkedIn badge next to their name. That's
an interesting point you just mentioned there. So consistently connect with your target audience, and then if they connect, then you send them a message, and then you start the interaction, right? You're not messaging people who aren't connecting with you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we can use InMail as well, and we have. It tends to work better for very direct type offers. It's like, let's say SaaS is can be a good example where you solve a specific problem. But for more network focused and high trust building, high big deal sizes, I find connecting is more effective.
Okay. And so we just touched on that briefly, but what are some ways that people complicate this approach? And then, so the inverse of that is simplifying it. So, but what are some common mistakes people make in complicating?
And with this approach, it's I think a lot of times people change. I think they change a lot without understanding what they're changing or the impact that has. Okay. When you're reaching out to a lot of people, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it as well. With sales, successful sales is still most of the time. Most people are saying no. And if you're not used to it, especially if you come from a technical background, it's hard to know what success looks like. And you could be running something that's successful and be changing it because it just doesn't feel successful, because you've got these long sales cycles and you're not seeing that immediate return. So I think one way people complicate it is changing too often or calling it a failure before we even really know. And because people don't know the numbers. And how else do they complicate it? More often than not, people just don't stay consistent. They just don't do it.
Okay. Yeah, I see that they're not consistent enough. Then one day they'll do 50 or 100 or 1 week, and then the next week they'll do 0, and they're not learning the lessons that the problem solving stuff that you would naturally learn as you're doing it consistently. The other thing that I see is like what you mentioned, they'll change 3 or 4 variables and they won't know which one worked. Right? Instead of just changing one variable at a time and just slowly moving the dial to what works, and so they go, okay, that's what it is. Then that's why obviously they A/B test. But with the power of automation these days, people will try something and blast out 200 or 300 emails or something, a connection request, and then they go, oh, hang on, that wasn't even proven to work. So and that's what I think trying to scale too quickly is that's a complication as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions here relevant. Well, I'll just quickly jump into those. So CJ, with the premium profile, unfortunately, it's not a filter. You sort of have to go through manually, or if you're using automation software, some of them are pretty slick and can pull in a list of just people with open profiles. Once again, tend to focus more on connection campaigns, just because you're pulling them into your network. It's just you have more ability to engage and connect and move the needle. And that sort of leads into Matthew's question. So the process is to find them, us to connect. People generally connect with people they don't know without knowing why. So when you reach out to connect, you can actually put a message in the connection message. And I'm a strong believer in telling people why you want to connect, because then if you can get them to connect based on your value, then you've set yourself up to actually lead the conversation where you want it to go around the value you bring. I just saw those questions there. I thought I'd jump on those quickly, Gavin.
It's good. So we've got a couple of questions left. We're at 47 minutes, so we've got 13 minutes left. So we're almost on time. So how do you structure an engagement sequence, Ryan? So I think that's partly what Matthew just asked then, right? It's connect with a couple of follow-ups. Potentially.
Yeah, so this is a massive topic, and there's sort of no one right answer, but there are some core concepts that I'd like to get across. So I think in the email after this, you're going to send out some resources. There's a really good video I've put together on how to write a message sequence and what works, and message sequences that have generated over $1 million. It's not always intuitive. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not effective. And that's the challenge here, is sometimes messages that don't look good work really well, and some messages that look really good don't work well. You know what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So in terms of trying to keep it simple for you guys, we tend to just use a 4-drip message sequence. So 4 messages, aim to start engagement. Once someone replies, then, we actually have a human conversation. We have different ways to nurture that. But let's talk about the first 4 messages that you send to someone, that the idea is to try and get them to start or reply or show interest in what you do. So message 1 is the connection message. You only have a very small amount of characters. You want to build credibility, trust around the idea that you can solve a problem, and get them to connect based on the value that you provide in like 2 sentences. It's once again, we can't get too technical here, but Gavin will send out a really good resource that'll help you with that.
I've just put it in the chat, the video on YouTube. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think it's really important to get people to connect based on your value, because then it's not like, I'm sure you've all seen it on LinkedIn. People say, hey, I checked out your profile. You look interesting. Let's connect. Or I'd love to join your network. It's just these really, there's no reason for the connection. Yep. And you're better having less people connect with you, but the right people connecting for the right reason. Worse
still, they do that, and then within a day later, then they start asking you if you want to work with them without actually getting to know you. So they connect under false pretenses, and there's a cost of that, of breaking trust and rapport there. So it's actually, yes, they'll connect, but they won't go any further.
Yeah. So then the next message after they connect, and if they don't connect, then we sort of just leave it and might come back to them later. The first message after connecting is almost like your pitch or your opportunity to, you're trying to gauge interest. And then the next 2 messages after that, the next one is really just bringing attention back to that first message. And the last message is what we call a classy goodbye. It's like, hey, this is the last time I'm going to reach out. If it's of interest, let me know. It sounds ridiculous, but works really well. So the money's in that first message, is how do you get them to express some interest? So some core concepts, you can be super direct or you can be really passive. It just depends. You got to test it. It depends on the product, the service, all sorts of things. But some core concepts you want to lean on are keep it short, very short. Keep it conversational, sort of 3 to 5 sentences max, maybe more, it just depends. But as a rule of thumb, keep it very short. 1 call to action. Don't give them 3 options. They won't take any. Give them 1 option to take, and make that option easy to take. Don't ask them to book in a call, pay an invoice, or anything ridiculous like that. Something that's easy to action is, hey, is this of interest? Yes. Okay, great. Now you've gauged someone who's of interest, and then you can follow up and manually nurture. So there's, I'll probably stop. Otherwise, I'm going for it.
So a good connection rate is what, 1 in 3, 30%, and so that's with messages there. David, you asked that question, and without it, it would be significantly less, probably 1 in 10, right? So, but again, David, it's all about your target audience. If they connect without the message, or you feel like that's more authentic to your brand, test it.
It can work. Yeah. In short, I've done testing with it, and sometimes you can increase your connection rate, but lower your lead rate. It does depend, but it can work.
Yeah. Is being active on LinkedIn important? Like posting, I think that was a question earlier on as well. Roy might have asked that. I think I could be.
I'll say it depends. So we talked a little bit before about how you build trust. So the 4 ways you can build trust were credibility, expertise, like niching on a specific area, having a strong offer or value proposition, core offer, and the other one was branding and likability and posting content. So you can post content and not do anything else right, and people will engage with you and come to you and buy from you, essentially, even if you can't do any of the other parts right. So is it important? It depends on your market. If you don't have much credibility that you can lean on, you don't have case studies, you aren't particularly niche, you have a fairly wide target market and a lot of competition, and you have a fairly broad, let's say, consultative offer where you can't really niche or put like a specific productized offer together, you might want to lean really heavily on being active on LinkedIn and getting your voice out there, and people will come to you. So it just depends what you can leverage. It's definitely a good idea. The short answer is yes, it's a great idea. Is it necessary? No, depends. Yeah.
So, and to answer your question there, Roy, I think one of the things you need to ask yourself, or everyone should ask themselves, is how much effort, or how much weekly effort can we consistently devote to lead generation activities during the week? Whether it's 10 hours for the team or it's 40 hours combined with 4 people. And then what you do there is part of your strategy is break down and go, okay, we're going to do 2 hours of connecting a week, 5 hours of content. Then we're going to run a webinar or a newsletter, and breaking that down so you can consistently do all the parts of your strategy that you are satisfied that will address your total addressable market. So we're just talking about LinkedIn here, but you would have other lead generation strategies, maybe using cold email outreach, maybe you're doing in-person meetings. So I think it's about creating your overarching strategy, which I'll talk about that in a second. And then it's being consistent. The number one thing that Ryan said is being consistent across all lead generation channels for the long term to get the results.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
so
you're right.
There was another question Roy asked about, like, what's the balance? How much should you post, whether it's daily? It's a really tough one because like I'm pretty relentless about tracking my time on things, because this is an activity that doesn't necessarily cost you money, but it costs you time, and your time's really valuable. And so it does cost you money. Let's say you want to make $1 million a year. Your time needs to be about $600 an hour. So if you spend an hour posting a piece of content, has that provided more than a $600 return? And it's hard to gauge because content sort of strengthens a lot of your other activities.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can obviously delegate and lower the cost as well. But if it's pulling your time away, you need to consider like how much is reasonable. And I think what you should consider is, how can I be more efficient? Like if I can lower the quality maybe 10% by delegating, but a tenth of my time, then that's a more effective process. If that makes sense. It's really hard to answer, but yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think that's part of your strategy there as well. And so I'll answer. We're at the question part now, and then we'll talk about some next steps in a second. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. Phil, I guess the answer to your question is when it feels right. Like I'm sure you get messages on LinkedIn where they go, "Hey, I'm blah 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 blah. Do you want to get on a call?" Without offering any value first. I think if you think about why someone should want to get on a call with you. If you can offer them a huge amount of value and they get value from the call, I think you should offer it. But it's testing. It's testing what works and what's authentic to your brand and what the reception is. I have a white paper. I'll send people a white paper on the topic of sales market fit, then ask them, do they want to discuss it, how it applies to their business? And that, I have some success with that. But I'm trying to add value first before asking. So it just depends on your approach and what the results are. So I would test. If you ask too soon and you're not getting the results, then put it out a little further. It's about tweaking those things one at a time.
Yeah. I'll also jump in and just add, like, I like to refer to what I call the snowball effect. Is it's easier for them to say, yes, this is of interest, than it is to say yes to a call. But once someone says, yes, it's of interest, it's easier to propose a call. It's like, hey, is this something that's of interest? Okay, great. Well, if you like, I can send over some resources that'll help you out. Or if you prefer, I can introduce myself over a quick call. Can I give you a call next week? So people like to feel like they have the option, but you want to make sure the better option, what feels like the better option, is the one that you want them to choose. Another example is, when you want someone to use your booking link, people can be funny about using those. So what you say is, hey, let me know when suits for a chat, or if it's easier, just use my booking link. So they feel like they have the choice not to use it, but you position it as the better, more sensible option. And you want to always consider that. Give people the option, but make your option the better option. if that makes sense.
Yep. So, and I guess, Roy, your other question here is, if you had 100 hours, is there a guide on what to spend on most activities? Roy, it really depends on your target markets and how you want to capture your total addressable market. So one of the things that comes down to your fundamental lead generation strategy and how you want to, what are your short-term strategies that you want to get to those early, those people in the market who are buying now? Then how are you going to nurture those who are further in the market, not quite ready? Then how are you going to build credibility with those people who are a couple of years away? So, and like what Ryan said, if you can leverage LinkedIn on short, medium, and long and get the snowball effect and reusing content, then you'll find that maybe you don't need to spend 100 hours because you're repurposing content, or you can turn 100 hours into 150 hours or something like that. So
yeah, well, 100 hours, if you take 100 hours to write a post, then you shouldn't do anything. But if you can, in 1 hour, like I think bucketing tasks is a great way to add more leverage and efficiency into your work. So I personally would record a year's worth of content in like the first 2 weeks of the year and then just space it out throughout the rest of the year, because you're in that creative zone. It's not always a viable option for everyone, but think about how you can be more efficient with it. Exactly what you said, Gavin, repurpose content, repost things. That's all paid advertising is. It's just repurposing and reusing the same content. So do it for free on LinkedIn. Just reuse your post. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had some polls here just before we get onto this final page. Is what 46% of you using LinkedIn as lead generation? 20% no, 33% plan to but haven't started, and then 38% have an overarching lead generation strategy, and 61% don't. So that's in line with some research that I recently completed as well, but it's a relatively easy fix. So Ryan, if people need help tactically finding leads on LinkedIn, and so what they can book a strategy call with you or your team to talk through their business and give them some recommendations on what to on how to approach it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the best way. Otherwise, I think you'll send out some links afterwards. We've got a YouTube channel where we teach everything that we do for free. If it's of interest, we do even have a training program, but it's all on YouTube. So that's the best place to go if you're wanting to learn. Yep. But if you want someone to do it for you, then reach out to us and book a call.
Yep, awesome. And then also, look, if you need help creating an overarching lead generation strategy, we're about to run next week, we're starting a 60-day lead generation bootcamp where we look at that overarching strategy. And that's more aligned with what you were asking there, Roy, about how to structure short, medium, and long-term strategies. Again, there's some links here. They come out on a timer earlier, but we'll send these out. If you want to have a chat about what your lead gen strategy is, we can have a strategy call, and we can have a talk and see if that boot camp might be suitable for you. Okay. Awesome. Well, I think that's it. If anyone has any more questions, please let us know. Otherwise, we're right on an hour there. So we want to say thank you, and we'll give it a couple of seconds if anyone has any more questions. Otherwise,
and thanks so much as well, Gavin. It's been fun. I haven't been a bit slack on the webinars and stuff this year. It's good. Yeah.
I really appreciate you wearing the red tie and the clothes that you did on that photo that you sent me, mate. It looks like we just took it. So
gotta. What do you mean? I always wear my red tie, right?
So Phil, I'll send you some messages, but basically the boot camp is helping you structure, dissecting your market into some fundamental framework so you get more targeted in your lead generation, and how to get a better return on effort. So I'll send you some information on it, and then we can have a chat if you like, or set up a call and have a talk. So good to see you, Ian. I saw you log in here before. So thanks everyone. Have a nice day, and I'll send this information out. It'll come out in an email in a couple of hours with all the links and stuff like that. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks so much, Gavin, for having me.
You're welcome, mate. I really appreciate your time, Ryan. I'd give you a celebratory bottle of wine. I just don't have one.
That's all right. I got some water here.
Right, see ya.
Cheers. Bye.